I was an Army civil affairs specialist for 8 years, and I want to tell you the most important thing I learned during that time. And not only during that time, it may be the most important thing I should have ever learned when I was young, but didn't. Many people are quick to point out that life isn't fair. Wah! And we all know people who are ridiculously intelligent, but all of their efforts go unnoticed. Still, some people point to some ass munch and say they're only successful because they had well-to-do parents. And other people will point out that that's not enough. They'll tell you that said ass munch also worked really hard. But there's something missing from everyone's equation that is more powerful than knowledge, talent, family, intelligence, and hard work. And that is social capital. This just refers to the people and social circles you're exposed to. Now I know that it's important, and a video about this is almost certain to be unsuccessful, but I'm making it anyway, because you don't know how important it is. And at the risk of sounding cliche, it is incredibly important that you watch all of this video and understand it so that you know how to reprioritize your academic and business efforts. Otherwise, you will be nothing, regardless of your talent and hard work. So what do civil affairs do? Well, if you look up JSOC, you'll see recognizable names like the 75th Ranger Regiment, Delta, Army Special Forces, Navy SEALs, and that other one. What is that? That is the civil affairs. Now, I was primarily trained as a negotiator, and civil affairs do many, many things. One day you might be negotiating safe passage of troops through a weird country, or you might be carrying a backpack full of money through the desert. One of our main jobs was to go to a foreign country, wear plain clothing, get to know who knows who in an area, and literally create a social map. This person knows that person who knows that person. Understand the key leaders in the area, including people like barbers and bartenders who may overhear things. Car salesmen, they're great for knowing where the money is moving. It was during this time that I really understood the common denominator, social capital. It was literally my job to create social maps and understand who knew who, and why they knew them, and who was important in an area. What makes social capital different, and what's so important to understand, is that social capital is so powerful, unlike intelligence, work ethic, knowledge, talent, and skills, is that you can be successful with only social capital. Not that I recommend that, because, of course, if you have all of those things, you do astronomically better. But the old saying has always and will always hold true. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And truthfully, it's both. It is both who you know and what you know. Now, to help visualize this, I put it into a linear graph. Although, you remember Yeah But Guy from chapter 1 of my last book? If the examples that I'm about to give are not good ones, don't discard an otherwise good point because you're getting hung up on one thing. Put better examples in the comments section and I'll start using those. The examples are not important. Understanding the point, the way I understand it momentarily, is what you ought to be aimed at. Now cue the graph. You'll see here that we have someone with no work ethic or skills, in the sense that he's not an accountant, an architect, an economist, an athlete, or anything like that, but he gets tens of millions of dollars from countries like China and basically every country that'll give him money. He says that he sells countries information. He doesn't put it like that, of course. He says that he sells them consultations, but what's a consultation? An exchange of words. What are words? Information. So he sells information, according to him, but we all really know that what's going on here is that Biden's father was the president. So he has social capital, that'll get you tens of millions of dollars. Now we have Bush. Bush was not famous for being intelligent. I know that's debatable, but he had social capital. His father was the president. He was a pilot. He ran companies, so he had both knowledge and social capital. That'll get you hundreds of millions, if not billions. Then, and people are going to really hate me for this, you have Elon Musk. Now, you can hate the man and still understand this point, so bear with me. He had social capital, knowledge, and hard work. So if you're tracking so far, no one listening to this should be surprised that he's worth $1 trillion. Now, the sad thing is, this makes those who say all you need is rich parents to be successful kind of right. Now, the child can still screw this up, but if the parent's situation exposes the child to the one ingredient necessary social capital, the child will adopt the parent's network and be successful. But that's still three things: parents, money, and social capital. This is still a really good thing because, and here's the good news, you can still simulate a large percentage of the rich parent equation by building your own social capital. I've seen many people in my profession do this. So success is not impossible, but it is impossible if all you have is hard work. If you trace everyone's lifeline at some point, you will find that everyone who is successful at their endeavors, I know the word success is a homonym and it means different things, but bear with me. If you track the lifeline of everyone who did something big, you will find that they were at some point exposed to a person or a group of people who changed their life for the better. And the people who are antisocial, like me, are going to have a much harder time. But it is almost the case that no one without social capital was ever successful and did big things for the world. But it is the case that with enough social capital, you cannot be unsuccessful. That's how many mountains social capital moves for you. In order to have lots of social capital and be unsuccessful, you have to try really hard to screw up your own success through drugs or overspending or both.
The highest paid actor in American television history. Not one of the highest paid. The highest paid.
But even then, it's ridiculously easy to bounce back, as all those people did. Even then, with enough social capital, you may not even need to bounce back. It may be nearly impossible to fall. And you can even avoid any consequences. Even if you overspend, you're a drug addict, commit treason, like to film yourself beating prostitutes, and are guilty of tax evasion. Throughout history, there are many examples of people who used social capital to their advantage, and that may have been their only one talent. Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to regret using Jeffrey Epstein as an example. I already do. What did Jeffrey Epstein ever do? This guy was rich, he had an island, but what did he ever produce? What did he invent? What did he engineer? On top of that, he was obviously terrible. The guy was almost illiterate. I read some of his emails, yet right out of school, he gets a high-level job at a bank. We've talked about this before, but typically the wealthy don't seek wealth from a W-2 type of employment. Why is it that people run for Congress or Senate? And why is it that representatives leave office worth hundreds of millions of dollars? It is not from their salary. The answer to both questions is social capital. They both get that job and create wealth because of social capital. They understand that the people they'll meet, the connections they'll make, the corporations that they're exposed to will be the social capital they need in order to create generational wealth. Why was General Patton the most successful general of the Second World War? The military strategies that were credited to Patton were largely thought up and carried out by lesser-known people in the military hierarchy at the time. Many of his subordinates reportedly hated him. Patton was something of a caricature.
He was notorious for carrying around a Colt 45 and .357,
which many people think was to be badass. But I suspect the reason was to protect himself from his own men, because they sure as heck were not, because he was using them in battle. Much of Patton's own military strategies involved how he would appear to the press, and his own ego, how he would compare himself to other generals at the time. On many occasions, rather than agree to a strategy that would reduce unnecessary American casualties, Patton would insist on a plan that would rush his forces into a place before the forces under an allied nation's general, so that Patton would get credit for a victory rather than another general. So ego would take priority over a well-thought plan or saving lives. In one instance, a commander under Patton refused Patton's plan in favor of a better one because this commander had more combat experience than Patton and a better plan. Patton became irate and threatened to have the commander arrested, but the men under this commander liked their commander so much that they drew their weapons on Patton and forced him out of the fob. Or so the story goes. I don't know how a man with that kind of an ego could just walk away from that, but whatever. Patton is also notorious for not believing in PTSD. The point is that General Patton was so well celebrated and had such an accomplished career because he understood that reputation and social capital were everything. He played into his public image, he played the press, he worked the newspapers. He understood that that was the way to climb his ladder. But the names of the people who are more competent than Patton had far less successful careers. and their names are lost in history books that no one will read. Now, you would be wrong to take away from this that social capital leads to money or currency, because the correct way to visualize this is that social capital is currency, because a currency isn't valuable inherently. What makes a currency valuable is that it's popular. What makes a currency valuable is how popular it is. In other words, it's social capital. Why is USD valuable? Because people decided it is. You might say, well, it's a paper certificate representing a specific amount of gold, except that it's not. The petrodollar is a real thing. A currency is only valuable relative to its social capital. Why is Bitcoin valuable? Because it has utility? No. There are other cryptocurrencies with far more utility and better technology built into it. In fact, there are thousands of other cryptocurrencies. Now, yeah, but guy might say, yeah, but part of Bitcoin's utility is that its network is larger and more difficult to attack. And that's true, but you'd be making my point for me. No matter how you look at it, Bitcoin is the most valuable cryptocurrency because it has the most social capital. Is that perhaps too abstract for you? Well, let me ask you this. What is Dogecoin? Why is it valuable at all? Doge is essentially an imaginary photo. It's a meme. It's not even a piece of paper. It's only valuable if other people buy it so that you can sell your stake in it to someone else for more than what you paid for it. Here's another question. What's an ETF? Why is it valuable? Why are some ETFs more valuable than others? Well, by now, you should know the answer to that question. If you're in the market for a really good book, or even just a kind of decent one, you can check out Question Things by Jonathan Davis on Audible or Amazon. Links are in the description below. As usual, I don't make any money on these videos, so thank you for listening or watching, or both, listening and watching. I do this simply because I like it. I legitimately like it.
Toodaloo.